Sometimes love feels like it's all you need. You think that if you choose the person who makes your heart race, everything else will fall into place. But life doesn't always listen to the heart. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how choosing love cost me everything. How it tore my family apart, how it filled my life with regret, and how even after all these years, I still hear my father's words echoing in my mind. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, a close-knit community where everyone knew your business before you even walked into a room. My family was well respected. My father, Richard Collins, owned the local hardware store and was known for his discipline, hard work, and old-school values. My mother, Grace, was gentle, kind, and always eager to please my father, even if it cost her her own happiness. I was their only child, and I was their pride. From the outside, it looked like I had everything: a stable home, loving parents, and a future that promised comfort and security. But inside, I was restless. Even as a teenager, I wanted something more. I wanted adventure, passion, something unpredictable. I wanted to feel alive. It was at the community college that I met Alex. He wasn't from around here. He had a rough edge, a restless energy that made him seem like he belonged anywhere and nowhere at the same time. He wore leather jackets even in summer and always had that half smirk, like he knew secrets the rest of us didn't. I should have known better. I should have walked away. But the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the room, it made me feel seen, wanted. My father would have called him trouble. My mother probably would have prayed for me. But I didn't care. We started with coffee dates and late-night drives. He told me stories of far-off cities and wild experiences. I believed him. I believed in him. For the first time, I felt free. When I finally introduced him to my family, it didn't go well. My father's eyes hardened the moment Alex walked through the door. "This is him?" he asked, his jaw tight. "The one you've been sneaking around with?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, yes, this is him. He makes me happy. But I knew it would only make things worse. I tried to explain, but my father's disappointment hit harder than any slap. He told me that people like Alex ruin good families. That I was naive, reckless, and selfish. My mother cried quietly in the kitchen while I stood frozen. I thought, they'll come around. But they didn't. When I told Alex I wanted to take our relationship further, he smiled that same crooked smile and said, "I'll always be here for you." For a while, it was perfect. We moved into a small apartment near the college. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. I worked part-time at a bookstore while Alex took odd jobs. We spent nights cooking together, laughing until our stomachs hurt and dreaming about what our life would become. I even started planning our future. But reality has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. My father cut me out completely. No calls, no letters. My mother sent flowers once, but they were returned unopened. I miss them. Every day. I cried into my pillow some nights, wishing I could hear my mother's voice just one more time. But pride kept me from reaching out. I told myself, once Alex and I are settled, everything will be fine. Once they see I'm happy, they'll forgive me. I was wrong. For a while, everything seemed like it was going to work out. Alex and I built a life together, or at least we tried to. Our little apartment was filled with mismatched furniture, cheap candles, and love that felt strong enough to shield us from the world. But love doesn't shield you from betrayal. It started with small things. A missed call. A late-night text that he didn't want me to see. A sudden change in his mood whenever I asked about his day. At first, I brushed it off. Work's tough, he'd say, giving me that half-apologetic look that made it hard to press further. Are you okay? I'd ask, worried. Yeah, he'd grin. Just tired. I wanted to believe him. Then, one night, I came home early from work. I had planned a surprise for him, his favorite dinner and a movie marathon. But as I turned the key and stepped inside, the world I thought I knew crumbled. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open and froze. Alex was on the couch with a girl I'd never seen before. Her head rested against his shoulder. His arm draped protectively around her waist as they whispered and laughed softly. The sound of their laughter cut through me like glass. I stood frozen at the threshold, unable to breathe, unable to speak. For a long minute, they didn't even notice me. Then Alex looked up. His eyes locked on mine. Panic flashed across his face. Emily, he whispered. But it was too late. The girl's eyes widened, and she jumped off the couch. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked out before I could say something I'd regret. The walk back to my car felt endless. My legs shook so badly I could barely unlock the door. I sat there, staring blankly at the dashboard, tears streaming down my face. How could he? How could the one person I trusted more than anything choose to betray me like this? I drove aimlessly that night, not knowing where I was going until I pulled over near the riverbank. The sound of the rushing water filled my ears. I curled up in the seat and sobbed until my chest hurt. For the first time, I felt alone. Not because I was without a boyfriend, but because I was without love. The next morning, I confronted him. I saw you, I said, my voice steady but cold. His eyes darted around, unsure how to respond. I saw you with her. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. I'm sorry, he muttered, eyes downcast. It just happened. It just happened? I spat, the words bitter. For days, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I cried in silence, clutching a pillow and whispering his name until exhaustion took me. But the worst part wasn't just the betrayal. It was the emptiness. I kept thinking about how everything had started so beautifully. How we'd planned our life together. How I had left everything behind, including my family, for him. Was that love, or was that a mistake? I also thought about my father's words. He'll ruin you. How bitter those words had sounded back then. But now they echoed louder than ever before. It wasn't long before more secrets started slipping out. I found out that the girl he was with wasn't just a fling. She was someone he had been seeing behind my back for months. Worse, she had been at our apartment before. She knew me. And worse still, she had warned him that I'd never forgive him. A cold rage bubbled up inside me. The trust, the love, the hope, it was all gone. I started imagining the life we could have had, only to see it crumble like sand slipping through my fingers. And that's when something inside me snapped. I realized that I had two choices. I could cry myself to death and let him walk away untouched, or I could rise from the ashes and make him feel what I felt, the pain, the emptiness, the heartbreak. I didn't want to destroy him. Or maybe, deep down, I did. But either way, I knew I couldn't let this betrayal go unanswered. So I began to plan. I kept my friends close. I didn't let anyone know how deeply I'd been hurt. I acted normal. I smiled when I had to. But in the shadows of my heart, I wrote a silent vow. I will show him what it feels like to lose someone who gave him everything. Little by little, I started gathering information. When he wasn't around, I checked his phone. I traced his calls. I learned about his weakness, his desire to always feel wanted, to be the hero, to feel like he's in control. I studied every pattern. And I waited. That's when the real story began. For days, I wandered through my own mind like a ghost. I went to work, smiled at strangers, even cooked dinner occasionally, but none of it felt real. My reflection in the mirror stared back at me with tired, hollow eyes. I barely recognized myself. I kept thinking about Alex's face when he saw me at the door. The look of guilt, the fear, it haunted me. But there was something else. Something deeper. I realized that what tore me apart wasn't just the affair, it was the fact that he made it seem like I wasn't enough. That everything I gave him, everything I sacrificed, meant nothing. I had loved him with all my heart. I had trusted him blindly. And he had thrown that love away like trash. I wanted him to feel that emptiness. To realize that when love leaves, life becomes unbearable. But revenge isn't something you rush into. It's a slow fire, a careful game. If I wanted it to hurt, to be unforgettable, I needed to be patient. I needed to plan. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and a pen. I wrote in neat, deliberate letters. He needs to feel the loss. But not at once. He needs to unravel. Then I listed everything I knew. His weakness, validation. His arrogance, he thinks he can control everything. His guilt, hidden but real. His secrets, multiple affairs. His lies, small and large. I smiled as I underlined the last point twice. I began to rebuild my life on the outside. I signed up for a gym membership. I took a weekend painting class. I started dressing better, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted to remind myself that I still mattered. But none of that was for healing, it was camouflage. My friends thought I was moving on. Inside, I sharpened every thought, plotted every move, and built a strategy that would bring him down, not in a scream, but in silence. Slowly, like a spider weaving its web. The first step was to gather proof. I hacked into his email with help from an old friend who owed me a favor. Every message, every whispered confession, every secret arrangement, it was all there. I printed them out and stored them in a hidden folder in my apartment. I also reached out to his coworkers, asking questions. Casual conversations disguised as small talk helped me uncover more of his lies. His colleagues knew but stayed silent. They were afraid. I made sure to collect their names, their faces, and any details that would one day be useful. The next step was to reclaim my identity. I started posting anonymous messages in forums, sharing stories of betrayal. I didn't use his name, but enough people knew the situation to connect the dots. Soon, whispers began. He's not the man you think he is. He cheats constantly. He'll leave you when it suits him. The poison spread. It wasn't aggressive, but it worked. Then I thought of confronting him directly, but I knew it would only feed his ego. No, this had to be more elegant. I decided that he would lose not just me, but everything that made him feel superior. I began connecting with the other women he had deceived. At first, they were hesitant. How do you even know this? One asked. Are you sure it's him? Another whispered. But I showed them screenshots, proof, and little details only they would know. Slowly, they opened up. Some had stories just like mine. Some had been discarded. Some still hoped he would change. We began sharing stories and forging an alliance. It felt dark, but strangely empowering. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances. I attended events with him when necessary. I smiled. I laughed. I even flirted occasionally, just to feed his sense of invincibility. Inside, I burned. At night, I'd sit by the window with a glass of wine and whisper, soon. One evening, I ran into his father at a grocery store. He looked at me with pity. I heard about what happened, he said softly. I smiled politely. As weeks passed, I mapped out my final moves. I knew I couldn't simply expose him and walk away. That would be too easy. He needed to feel isolation, shame, and regret. So I built a sequence of events. Step 1. Anonymous messages and leaked screenshots spread across his workplace and friend circles. Step 2. I'd confront the other women publicly, but in such a way that it made him question everyone. Step 3. I'd approach his family and deliver the truth, forcing him into confrontation. Step 4. I'd give him the opportunity to confess, but only if he accepted responsibility. Otherwise, his life would unravel without him understanding why. The hardest part was waiting. Every day felt like torture. But patience was my weapon. I reminded myself that this wasn't about anger, it was about justice. It was about teaching him that love isn't something you throw away and expect forgiveness for. And then, one rainy evening, I finally made my move. The messages began circulating. The photos began leaking. His friends avoided him. His father called him to confront him. And through it all, I stood silent, watching from the sidelines. I wasn't cruel. I was just waiting for him to face what he had created. What happened next changed everything. But that's a story for another chapter. The storm had finally come. It wasn't the kind that thunders or flashes dramatically across the sky, but rather the quiet, suffocating kind that wraps itself around you like a cold hand, pressing until you can't breathe. That's how it felt when the first message dropped. The first screenshot, the first whisper, the first look of doubt in a friend's eye when Alex walked into a room. I watched it all happen. From the comfort of my living room, with a glass of wine and a half-smile playing on my lips, I watched him unravel. It began with an anonymous post in a popular online forum dedicated to relationship advice and healing. The message didn't name Alex, but the details were damning. My partner has been cheating on me repeatedly, lying and manipulating everyone around him. How can someone betray love so easily? The post went viral among our circle. People connected the dots. Friends began exchanging whispers. One coworker messaged another, "Do you think it's him?" Another replied, "I think it has to be." I saw the ripple effect take hold. Then came the first batch of screenshots. Carefully redacted to protect identities, but sharp enough to ruin reputations. Texts about secret dinners, romantic getaways, and crude messages. Even his own words, confessions typed with arrogance, then fear when exposed. I kept checking his social media. His followers began unfollowing him. His wife's friends left cold comments. His business partners stopped responding. It was beautiful. The slow poison was spreading. The next move was to pull the other women into the storm. I invited them to a private group chat. At first, they were hesitant. "I don't want more drama," one typed. "Why now?" another asked. But I sent them more evidence, names, locations, screenshots. I spoke not with hatred, but with empathy. "I know how you feel," I wrote. "I know how it burns when love is discarded." Gradually, they began to open up. Some had been his secret lovers for years. Others were new conquests. "Do you think he'll ever change?" one messaged. "Not unless we force him to," I replied. Together, we crafted messages to be sent at strategic times. Anonymous emails, late-night texts, carefully worded comments that hinted at betrayal without fully exposing him until the right moment came. Alex's downfall wasn't only personal, it seeped into his professional life. I began by forwarding sanitized screenshots to his HR department. I didn't name him outright at first. I framed it as concerns raised by multiple employees regarding workplace misconduct. The HR manager, shocked, began quietly investigating. Soon, whispers became formal complaints. His clients started pulling contracts. His biggest deal dissolved when a competitor heard of his behavior. I watched the stock prices of his small business fall. His phone buzzed constantly, but he still clung to denial. He messaged a few friends, pleading for help. I smiled. The hardest, but most essential step was confronting his family. I knew his father still loved him despite everything. His mother would be crushed, but necessary. I mailed them carefully written letters. You may not believe this. I wouldn't have either. But please, before it's too late, ask him the right questions. Inside, I included photocopies of incriminating texts and dated photographs. The next time I saw his father in the store, his eyes were bloodshot. "Emily," he whispered, barely able to speak. "Is it true?" I looked at him with compassion but didn't answer. His mother avoided eye contact altogether. The cracks had spread deep into the family foundation. The final act was the most dramatic. I waited until a gathering, a party celebrating his wife's birthday. I knew the perfect time, right when the room was full of friends and family, music and laughter ringing through the halls. I walked in wearing a soft smile. No one suspected a thing. The atmosphere. In the days that followed, Alex tried to apologize. He sent messages, emails pleading for forgiveness, handwritten notes at his doorstep. But I made it clear. You wanted to be someone else, I told him during a brief confrontation in the park. Now you'll live with what you chose. I didn't scream. I didn't lash out. I simply walked away. He stood there, powerless. That moment was the end. The revenge wasn't about cruelty, it was about teaching him to face the consequences of his own actions. He lost his job. His friendships dissolved. His family turned away. The empire he built on lies crumbled. And I, Emily, stood silent, victorious, but scarred. I wasn't celebrating. I was mourning the love that was destroyed, but knowing justice had been served. The final act wasn't about hurting him for the sake of revenge, it was about showing him what his choices had created. And as I walked away from the wreckage, I realized something deeper. Revenge is a bitter fruit. You savor it, but it never tastes as sweet as you imagined. And yet, it was necessary. The house was quieter now. Not because the world had grown calmer, but because Alex's world had fallen apart. The constant ringing of phones stopped. Invitations dried up. Social media profiles went silent. His once busy calendar sat blank. And I, Emily, sat alone in my living room, the same space where I had once watched him with love, dreamed of a future, imagined shared memories, and now only shadows remained. I didn't rush to celebrate. There were no parties, no declarations of victory. Only silence. And the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The void after revenge. At first, it felt intoxicating. The power. The control. The knowledge that I had taken back what had been stolen from me. But revenge, I learned, is a slow-burning fire. It consumes not only the person you target, but the one holding the flame. There were nights when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, haunted not by what I had done, but by what I had become. Was this justice? Or cruelty? Was I healing or merely hurting myself deeper? I had stood strong through it all, but now, with the noise gone, grief crept in. I missed the man I once loved. I mourned the trust that was destroyed, not just by his lies, but by the path I chose to walk. One evening, as I sipped tea by the window, I caught my reflection. The eyes that stared back at me were harder,